Today I'm talking about paper. I want to talk about two of my favorite papers that I use when I'm working with patterns and doing fitting. My first favorite paper is this alphanumeric or gridded or dotted paper. Those are the three names that you can find this paper under if you search for it. I am going to put a link in the description below to some smaller quantity options for you. I get mine on, a giant roll that lasts me a little bit, but I use my paper almost daily. So if you're, working on patterns and you don't need a giant roll, check the links below for some smaller quantity options. The reason why I love this paper is because of the grid that's created by a series of dots, numbers, letters, and symbols. Depending on the paper that you get, different brands have different, ways to make this grid. But here's the great part. When you put your pattern piece on this paper to trace it, what you want to do is you want to take advantage of the grid. Now, they might seem obvious, looking at it now, like we want to put it straight on the grid. But when I first started working with this paper, I didn't realize that. I slapped my pattern on like that. I traced it and I did some work with it. And then I brought it to see one of my pattern friends, Eric, and the first thing he said to me was, "Why aren't you taking advantage of the grid?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So let me show you what he's talking about just to drive the point home. Okay, so I'm going to use my ruler and a blue Sharpie marker, and I'm going to draw a line along the grid like this. Okay, and then if I needed to trace my pattern piece, I would do this first. Then I would line up the vertical line I drew that is agreeing with the grid with my center balance line or my grain line. That way, when I trace this pattern out, it will be square with the grid. So let me just extend this a little bit. I just want to show you. I'm going to make this a little bit longer. Okay, and then I'm going to trace my pattern piece. And the first thing I'm going to do is line up the center balance line with this grid, and I'll put some, a pattern weight on there. And then I'm just going to trace it. All right, so now that I've traced it, notice what I did here. I did not trace across the straight horizontal lines because it's easier to take your ruler and add those in after, like this. All right, so now you can see this pattern is square with the grid, so if I work with it and I make adjustments, I can see what's happening. So that's one way to use the grid, and I'm going to show you an example of a pattern that I adjusted on this paper in a minute to show you how you can see what's happening to the grain and then how to reestablish your grain if you needed to. But basically, another thing that you can use this paper for, and this is super important, if you're working with pants and you want to extend the length, it's really important to do that so it's square and agreeing with the center balance line on the pattern piece that you have already. Because I made a long vertical line and then traced my pattern on it, I now have the extended grain line below the leg. Let's say I wanted to make Bermuda shorts here because this is a short pattern, and just to keep it sort of realistic, let's say I wanted to add some flare to the leg. It's very easy to do that because I've already got it set up and it's very easy to work with. So basically what I'm going to do here is, because my grain line or my center balance line is already extending, past the original hem of this pattern, I know that what I add will agree with the pattern piece, you know, from side to side. Because if you slightly skew left or right when you lengthen a leg, that can cause it to twist in the fabric. So you can see here, I've got my pattern piece, I've got my grain line or center balance line, which is agreeing with the pattern piece I traced, and I'm set up to lengthen this leg, and then I can also create the fullness I need at the hem. All right, so I'm just going to change my color so you can see here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide what I want for the hem, the width at the hem. And let's say I just want to flare it out slightly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure my inseam to my center balance line, and I'm getting 1, 2, 3 1/4. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to mark a line that equals that there. And I'm going to do it over here too, and my guess is it's the same because it's a center balance line. So I've got 3 1/4 over here as well. So that's the original length. I'm just going to draw these lines a little bigger so you can see them. Okay. You know, and then of course you want to decide how much you want to lengthen, and I'm just going to measure down my center balance line. Let's say I want to lengthen it. Let's go with 6 inches. So I'm going to make a mark right here, and then I'm going to draw across. And the cool thing here is if I line up the short lines on my ruler with my center balance line here, and also keep an eye on, you know, how far they are from the grid. So you don't necessarily have to keep all your lines on the actual grid, but I'm using this line here, and I'm going to use the top edge to see where I am, you know, equidistant from the row of numbers over here. And then I can draw my new hem like this. Okay. So now I know it's straight because it's straight with the grid. It's straight with the grid. I've got the width of my hem that equals the knee up here. So if I wanted to make a straight leg shorts, I would just connect these. But if I wanted to add a little bit of flare, I would just add to both sides. So I'm going to add 3/8 of an inch to both sides because I don't want to make a lot of flare. I just want a little bit. And then you just connect to the original hem on the pattern piece like this. Okay, and you can see that what I've added here is lined up with the original pattern. It's not skewed left to right, and I can feel safe to cut this out and try it because I know it's, you know, everything is in agreement. So that's one of the big reasons why I love this paper. I'm going to show you another example here. And I worked on this during FabFit Friday a couple weeks ago, a few weeks ago now, where I showed how to draft a sleeve. And you can see here, I used a line on the grid to create my center line for my draft. And then it's just interesting to me to see what happens when I make wedge shape adjustments. So I didn't need to recreate the balance line here because I didn't make a wedge adjustment through the cap. So my center balance line is still straight, but look at how cool this is. I'm just gonna highlight what I did here. I did a little bit of a adjustment where I had to add some ease. So I just want to show you. So this is what I moved, and I'm just going to make a little thing here to show you. Okay, this is what I opened. This area right here is what I opened, right? But you can see how it shifts the grain over a little bit. And not that we need to do anything with that, but it just helps me see from side to side if I'm doing things symmetrically, because when I made this adjustment over here, I can sort of visually see that they agree in terms of, you know, they agree left to right. So it just helps your eyes see what's going on. I'm just going to show you here. This was the adjustment on this side. Okay, but again, it just helps me do things symmetrically, and it helps me see if things are straight and on grain. So I love this paper for working with patterns, for making pattern adjustments to keep things on grain. What it's not great for is if I wanted to trace on top. So you saw that on my leg here, I put the pattern piece on top and I traced around it. It's great for that, but one of the downsides of this paper is it's kind of thick. So if I bring out one layer here, you can see, I can kind of see through it. But if you're working with a pattern that doesn't have dark lines and you want to trace on top, like let's say you want to trace the pieces off of your pattern sheet without cutting them out, you can't trace around them. Then I love this, and actually this is so economical. This is medical exam table paper, and it's so economical. You can get a whole box of it, like 12 rolls of it, for not a lot of money. So I'm putting a link in the description below for this as well. But look at how nice and easy it is to see through and trace if you have to trace something that's underneath. So I'm not going to trace this, but I just wanted you to see how much clearer it is to see the lines compared to what I showed you when I laid the dotted paper on top. So this is an inexpensive, lightweight paper. It's easy to see through. I use it for all the things that I need to trace down through if I can't see the lines, you know, from underneath. And I use this alphanumeric gridded or dotted paper for everything else. So I'm amazed at myself that I haven't talked about pattern paper and cool tools yet, because it's one of my tools or supplies that I use all the time. And I think technically you could call the alphanumeric paper a tool because it has features on it that really help you, you know, make the work easier. So I love both of these papers. If you have any questions or comments, please post those below and I will help you. If you're enjoying my content, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel because it helps me grow. I want to thank everyone for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.